This is Comic Support, where we give you upcoming comic book stories for new readers and comic book superfans. In this issue, we talk about everyone's favorite web slinger. With Spider-Man being super popular in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and having a new video game coming out this fall, you might be interested to know how this relates to the current comic books. Hope you'll join me as we explore 5 key differences between Spider-Man comics and the MCU. My spider sense is tingling. Welcome to Comic Support. I'm Leon Scorpius, and in this issue we're talking about Peter Parker's Spider-Man. With writer Dan Slott leaving the Spider-Man comics after a decade of amazing stories and comic book events, this can be a good jumping on point for new readers as Nick Spencer tackles the web slinger and New York's favorite neighborhood Spider-Man. But if all you're familiar with is Tom Holland's Spider-Man from the MCU, then there might just be a thing or two that you should know before diving into the comics. As always, I want to thank Taymation Studios for bringing you this video. You can catch all of our latest videos by subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. If you enjoy this video and other comic support videos, please give us a like and comment below on what books you'll be reading this week. Number 1. Spider-Man isn't in high school anymore. So Peter Parker is back at the Daily Bugle for Nick Spencer's run. After being an adult for quite some time, he has a lot of experiences. He's been a scientist for a company called Horizon Labs. And he's also owned his own mega corporation, Parker Industries, where he sold webware, essentially smartphones, and became a multi-millionaire. And what I think sometimes was Dan Slott's interview for writing Iron Man, because definitely it showed what if Peter Parker had a lot of money like Tony Stark did. Really cool run if you want to read that, but that's kind of what his history was. As an adult, Spider-Man has also had a ton of girlfriends, not just Liz Toombs and maybe Zendaya coming up in the future here, who knows? But in the comic books, Peter Parker's been with Mary Jane Watson, Felicia Hardy, also known as Black Cat, where I think that's a cool relationship where it's kind of on and off. Kind of reminds me of like Batman and Catwoman, where it's his first like super powered girlfriend, love interest, lover. So that one's interesting. Of course, Gwen Stacy, although in the current comic books, she exists as Spider-Gwen. She came from a reality where Peter Parker died instead of Gwen Stacy dying, and she's dating Miles Morales. So that's something interesting. Cindy Moon, aka Silk. So you may have seen a little bit of Cindy as a cameo. She's also one of the Midtown High characters in Spider-Man Homecoming. But in the comic books, Cindy was another person that was bit by radioactive spiders, but was basically vaulted up for many, many years because of the looming threats of Moon, which we'll talk about later. She is known as Silk. So Cindy Moon, they had a very, very close and intimate relationship, but I think it added more about the two spiders wanting to mate versus loving their personalities. So that was definitely a big difference. In Dan Slott's run, he also had a very normal girlfriend named Carly Cooper. She was a New York City police detective and was able to get a lot of information from her because she was in the police. But as soon as she found out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, she left him. So that was that. And most recently, you would see Peter Parker with Bobby Morse, aka Mockingbird, who was his partner in Spider-Man Worldwide series. Lots of really interesting things. It was actually nice seeing Peter Parker being in a relationship again, but I don't think this one lasts long either. We'll see who Peter Parker's dating in Nick Spencer's run. Maybe somebody new, maybe he's an all-time favorite like Mary Jane. We'll see. Number 2. Spider-Man in the comics was actually Doctor Octopus for a while. Well, kinda. In Marvel Now, when the Marvel Comics relaunched in 2012, it gave us the Superior Spider-Man, which mind-swapped Otto Octavius, aka Doctor Octopus, with Peter Parker. Dr. Ock was dying, and in his dying days, he set up this master plan in order to swap bodies with him. And for an entire year, the only version of Spider-Man that you had was actually Doctor Octopus Spider-Man. It was really interesting because with Doctor Octopus's, evil genius background, we were able to see Spider-Man do a lot of crazy things. He had his own minions and goons. He had super high-tech technology like spider bots spying on everything. A really interesting run if you ever want to pick up the Superior Spider-Man run by Dan Slott. But yeah, it lasted almost a whole year. Thankfully, it reverted back to Peter Parker for the people that missed Peter Parker. But it was actually a fun run, very interesting story, and yeah, something that hasn't happened in the MCU yet. Number 3, Spider-Man's best friend isn't Ned Leeds in the comics. This one is confusing because there's actually a character in the comics named Ned Leeds. He's another reporter at the Daily Bugle that worked with Peter. Ned Leeds in the MCU is actually based on Ultimate Spider-Man's Genki Lee, who was written as a Korean American instead of the movie's Filipino identity. Genki in the comic books, however, is the best friend of Miles Morales. Although the friendship between Miles Morales and Genki is closely replicated in the MCU's friendship between Peter and Ned. But if you're reading the comics, who are Peter Parker's best friends? This one's fun because there's a lot of them, and the MCU does make a nod to a few. So, of course, Harry Osborn, who hasn't really been introduced in the MCU, is one of Peter Parker's best friends in the comics. He helped with Peter with Parker Industries, and he's not trying to kill Peter Parker, so that's always a good thing. Good job, Harry. Flash Thompson in the comic books is actually Venom slash anti-Venom, so he has had the symbiote and an anti-Venom version of that for quite some time, and Flash regularly helps Peter on a lot of missions. Flash Thompson, of course, in the MCU, doesn't have any powers. He's just a bully. So we'll see if there's any correlation later in the MCU. Ben Reilly is actually Peter Parker's clone. You'll know him in the comics as Scarlet Spider, so you might see them come up a while. Doctor Strange is actually a friend of Peter Parker's, one of the only superheroes that knows his secret identity and has actually helped him with identity problems. Specifically, in the comics, you have Peter Parker revealing to the world that he is Spider-Man, and he kind of wants to take that back. So there's a lot of different things that he does, and one of it's working with Doctor Strange so that everybody kind of forgets that he's Peter Parker Spider-Man. So it's a really hilarious nod in Avengers Infinity War when Spider-Man has that interaction with Doctor Strange, where he introduces him as Peter Parker and then takes it back and says, oh, we're using our fake names, in that case I'm Spider-Man. So a really funny nod to that. In the latest Doctor Strange comic book, the last issue in Donny Cates' run of Doctor Strange, Spider-Man actually returns and has a really cool team up and explores some of that friendship, just checking up on how Doctor Strange. You'll also see him in the comics with Miles Morales. Of course, Miles is younger than Peter Parker inside of the comic books, and Peter's trying to be a mentor to him here and there. Not very successfully, but he does. So there's a real strong relationship between those two. And my favorite friendship has always been Peter Parker's relationship with Johnny Storm, aka Human Torch. They've basically been like best friends back in the old comic days. Those two are really the only teenage superheroes amongst Iron Man and Captain America and Fantastic Four and Mr. Fantastic. So when it came to who were the kids in the comics, it was Peter Parker and Johnny Storm. Number 4. Spider-Man's universe is complex with lots of clones and alternate realities. Spider-Verse, a comic book event in 2014, featured a series of stories that introduced and reintroduced us to a wide variety of spiders. In the series, the baddie was this guy named Morloon, and his family were hunting every spider totem in the universe. So it introduces us to tons of Spider-Men, Spider-Women, all sorts of Spider-Universe personalities. It was so entertaining. There's so many different versions of Spider-Man, and we'll see a little bit of that in the video games, I think, with some of the different skins. If they are somehow able to bring it on the big screen, it would literally be an epic event. Really crazy. You have Spider-Man, you have Superior Spider-Man, Otto Octavius, you have Spider-Woman, You have Silk, of course, as I mentioned. You have Kane, which is another clone of Spider-Man. You had Spider-Gwen. You had Spider-Girl, who's in the cartoon of Spider-Man right now. If you watch the animated series, I don't remember what network it's on, but there was one. You have, of course, Miles Morales, Ultimate Spider-Man. You had Ultimate Black Widow, Jessica Drew in there. You had Spider-Man 2099. You had Spider-Girl. You had Spider-Punk, Spider-Man Noir, and one of my favorites, Spider-Ham. Actually, in the comics right now, there are some alternate realities that you can pick up. One of them is the comic book Spider-Man Renew Your Vows. In that comic book, it is a alternate universe where Peter Parker and Mary Jane stayed together and they had a daughter. It's been a huge fan favorite, so no surprise that there's an ongoing that's not in the main comic book continuity. But you'll see lots of versions of Peter Parker, lots of versions of Spider-Man, in a lot of Dan Slott's runs. So if you want to go back and check out in the comic books all the different versions, I would highly recommend Spider-Verse, and there was also a Spider-Verse miniseries as part of Secret Wars. Number 5. Spider-Man is Everywhere. Spider-Man, being an A-list Marvel superhero, is literally everywhere in the comics. His most notable run on the Avengers was in 2005 as part of the relaunched New Avengers. He was on the team with both Iron Man and Captain America, and in that series, Civil War didn't happen until much later. In the comics, Spider-Man was under Team Iron Man with the Hero Registration Act. He revealed his identity as Peter Parker to the world, and this is also when he receives his Iron Spider suit. Different from the MCU, though, Peter Parker ended up switching sides, and he's with Team Cap in the comic books. And that, of course, didn't happen in Civil War, but, of course, this was also an adult Peter Parker inside of the comic book Civil War that had to deal with a lot of repercussions of telling the world that he was Peter Parker. One of Dan Slott's last storylines in Amazing Spider-Man was Amazing Spider-Man Worldwide, where Peter becomes an international businessman and travels all over the world. So he has Parker Industries in like Europe and in America and in China, and you literally see Spider-Man everywhere around the globe. And you can also see Spider-Man everywhere in the comics teaming up with all of your favorites, including Wolverine, Deadpool, Fantastic Four, and even with the Dora Milaje in the upcoming Wakanda Forever Spider-Man #1. Lots of places in the comics that you can find Spider-Man, so Nick Spencer's Amazing Spider-Man #1 is going to be a great jumping on point. But if you see a cool Spider-Man team-up book and Spider-Man in another book, don't be surprised, he's literally everywhere. That's it for this issue. Tell me what your favorite version of Peter Parker is in the comments below. You can follow me on Twitter @LeonScorpius, and don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. I appreciate all the love and support, keep nerding out with me, and I will see you next issue.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to watch more from us, click on one of the thumbnails. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep up to date with our latest shenanigans. Be sure to click the bell for notifications, and check out the description below for a link to our Patreon page. See you next time!